If you had a £1 million retirement pot at age 60, how much could you actually spend? Is it £40,000 a year, £60,000 a year, or could you take £80,000 a year and properly enjoy the early years of retirement? Because after my last video, a lot of people quite rightly mentioned the 4% rule, and the 4% rule would suggest that from a £1 million pot, you start by taking around £40,000 a year. That sounds sensible, it sounds cautious, and it sounds responsible, but it also sounds like the kind of answer that gets approving nods from spreadsheets everywhere. But is it actually the right answer? Or could the following 4% rule mean you spend far too little during the years when you are healthiest, most active, and most able to enjoy your retirement? So, in this video, I'm going to test 3 different retirement spending plans. First, £40,000 a year, then £80,000 a year, and thirdly, a version where this couple spend more heavily in the earlier years and then they reduce their spending later. And the difference between those last two is much bigger than most people would expect. Before I show you the results, put your answer in the comments. If you had 1 million at 60, would you play safe on 40,000 a year? Or would you try and spend more while you were younger and healthier? So, let's introduce the couple. They are both 60, they're mortgage free, they have a main residence worth £500,000, but I'm not treating the house as money they can spend each year, because unless they sell it, downsize, or use some form of equity release, the house might make them feel wealthy, but it doesn't pay for holidays, food, energy bills, and the occasional we only went to browse trip to John Lewis. Their actual retirement pot is 1 million, and that's made up of £50,000 in cash, £100,000 in joint investments, and 2 pensions worth £425,000 each. So they have £850,000 in pensions and £150,000 in cash and investments. They're also expecting 2 state pensions from age 67. And in this model, each state pension starts at just over £12,500 a year and increases each year. The plan assumes general spending increases by 2% a year, and the pensions and investments elements are assumed to grow at 5% a year. And the figures shown in the report are nominal, which means they are future values and have not been adjusted back into today's money. So, these are predictions, they're not guarantees. They are simply a way of stress testing different decisions, because unfortunately, markets do not behave just because we've made a nice chart. The question is simple. Can this couple spend £80,000 a year from a £1 million retirement pot? And I want to be very clear, there are actually 2 different questions hidden inside that. Question 1, can they spend £80,000 every year, increasing with inflation for the rest of retirement? Question 2, can they spend £80,000 during the early active years of retirement and then reduce spending later? Those are not the same thing, and this is where a lot of retirement planning conversations can go wrong. People often ask, how much can I spend? But the better question is, how much can I spend, for how long, and what changes later? So, let's test it. Scenario 1, £40,000 a year, the 4% rule, whatever that is. So first we start with the classic, well-known 4% rule. 4% of 1 million is £40,000. So in this scenario, the couple spend £40,000 a year, increasing by 2% a year. This is the cautious version. They are not trying to maximize spending. They're trying to preserve capital, maintain security, and avoid running out of money. Let's look at what happens. You can see in the early years, the withdrawals are very manageable. The cash and investment assets are used first. The pensions continue to grow. And then, from age 67, both state pensions begin. And this is important because from that point onwards, not all of the spending has to come from the £1 million pot. Some of it is supported by the state pension income, so the portfolio has less work to do. Now, if we move through the projection, something quite interesting happens. The couple do not just avoid running out of money, they build up a very large projected surplus. And by age 100, the model shows around 3.3 million remaining in accessible pension and liquid assets. And when the home is included, total assets are projected at around 5.8 million. Again, those are nominal future figures, not today's money. But the direction of travel is very clear. The scenario is extremely secure in this model, possibly too secure, depending upon what the couple actually want. And this is the important lesson. The safest plan is not always the best life plan. If your main priority is to leave money behind, then this could be perfect. But if your goal is to enjoy retirement, travel, help family, create memories, and use some of the money you spent decades building, then £40,000 a year may be more cautious than necessary, because there is another risk in spending too much, but there's also a risk in spending too little. The risk is that you preserve the money, but you miss the moment. Scenario 2, £80,000 every year. So now let's move to the other extreme, £80,000 a year, every year increasing with inflation. This is an 8% starting withdrawal from the £1 million pot. And emotionally, this is a very different retirement. £40,000 a year might feel safe, and £80,000 a year might feel like freedom. Better holidays, more meals out, more family experiences, replacing cars without panicking, helping children or grandchildren, and generally feeling like retirement has actually started. So let's test it. At the beginning, it doesn't look disastrous. They start with 8 million, they spend 80k in the first year, the assets are still there, the graph hasn't burst into flames, and nobody has started to sell the kettle. But as the years pass, the withdrawals increase, the cash and investments are used up early, the pension starts doing more and more of the heavy lifting, and then from age 67, both state pensions begin, which helps, but the spending level is still too high. The state pension reduces the pressure, but they do not solve the problem. So let's move forward through the model. By the early 70s, the accessible pension value has fallen significantly, and by the mid 70s, the margin is getting very tight. And then we get the key reveal. At age 77, the model goes into shortfall. That means the accessible pensions and liquid assets have effectively been exhausted. So in this scenario, 80,000 a year forever doesn't work. It does not fail at 95, it doesn't fail at 100, it fails at 77. And 77 is not ancient. Many people at 77 are still active, still travelling, still supporting family, still enjoying life, and still very much needing financial security. So this is the danger of taking the more exciting spending number and pretending it continue forever. 80,000 for a year, yes. 80,000 for a few years, possibly, but 80,000 every year, increasing with inflation, regardless of what happens. In this model, it does fail quite early. Having said that, some people might be okay with the idea that they've run out of money in their late 70s and think, I've spent it all, I've enjoyed it, and I'm now happy to live on state pension, but it would be quite tight depending upon health and life expectancy. So we now have two extremes. The £40,000 plan is very safe, but potentially too cautious, and the £80,000 forever plan is exciting, but clearly quite risky. So this is where most retirement conversations become too simplistic. People often argue as if there are only two choices: either be sensible and spend 40,000, or be reckless and spend 80,000. But real retirement doesn't usually work like that. Most people do not spend the same amount at 60, 70, 80, 90 and 100, and each year varies. The early years of retirement are usually the most active because this is when most people want to travel, go out more, spend more time with family, replace cars, do the house, take the big trips. Then later, normal lifestyle spending may reduce. Not always. Sometimes care costs can be significant later in life, and that needs to be accounted for as well. But discretionary spending does typically change. Most people are not doing exactly the same holidays at 85 that they were doing at 61. And if you are, that's brilliant, excellent news. But please tell me your secret, because I'd love to bottle it. So the better question is not, can I spend £80,000 forever? The better question is, Can I spend more in the first part of retirement and then potentially reduce later? And that brings us on to the third scenario. Scenario 3, £80,000 early, then £50,000 later. So in this version, the couple still spend heavily at the start, but it's not £80,000 forever. The model is built with £50,000 a year of core spending, plus an additional £30,000 a year for holidays and lifestyle spending during the early years. So in the first phase, they are spending £80,000 a year, and then that additional £30,000 stops and they continue with the £50,000 core expenses. This feels much closer to how many people actually think about retirement when it comes to it. They're not saying we need £80,000 a year forever or until age 100. They are saying we want to enjoy the first 10 years whilst we're fit, active and able to do so. So let's test it. At the beginning, the graph looks similar to the £80,000 forever scenario. The withdrawals are high, cash and investments are used quickly, and the pension does start to reduce. Then the state pension begins at 67, and the key moment comes when the additional spending stops. The portfolio no longer has to support the same level of expenses, and this completely changes the shape of the plan. Instead of the assets continuing to fall at the same pace, the pressure reduces, the plan carries on through the 70s, it carries on through the early 80s, and then, in this scenario, the first shortfall appears at age 88. So, it's still not perfect, it still potentially needs more work, and it could still have some more flexibility. But compared that with the previous scenario, 80,000 forever runs into a shortfall at 77, 80,000 early, then 50,000 later runs into a shortfall at 88, and that is a massive difference. Not because the starting pot's changed, not because the investment return has changed, and not because the couple suddenly found a magic investment fund hidden behind the sofa. The difference is the shape of the spending. The issue is not just how much you spend, it's when you spend it and how long you spend it for. So what have we learned? The £40,000 plan based on the 4% rule looks extremely secure in this particular model. By age 100, the projected accessible pensions and liquid assets are still very high, and that may be ideal for someone who wants maximum security and a large inheritance. But for someone who wants to enjoy more of their retirement, it could be too cautious. The £80,000 forever plan goes too far the other way. It gives the couple a much more exciting lifestyle, but it does run out of accessible money by age 77, and that's too early for most people to be comfortable with. The flexible version is much more interesting, spending 80,000 during the early years, then reducing to £50,000 later, still eventually runs into a shortfall in the model, but not until age 88, and the average life expectancy in the UK is about 84. That shows why retirement planning should not be reduced to one percentage number. The 4% rule is useful. It gives you a sensible warning light potentially, but if you are planning to draw 8% from your retirement pot forever, the 4% rule tells you to slow down and test the plan properly. But the 4% rule does not answer every real life question. It doesn't know whether state pension income starts later, whether you have any other pension income to rely on, any other assets. It doesn't know whether spending reduces later. It doesn't know whether you want to front load retirement, and it doesn't know whether you care more about leaving money behind or enjoying more of it yourself, or a balance between the two. And it does not know what your health, family, lifestyle or priorities look like. How we would improve the flexible plan. So if this were a real planning conversation, I would not look at the third scenario and say, that's fine, off you go, because the model does still run into a shortfall at 88, so we could start refining it. Could they spend £80,000 for 7 years instead of 10? Could they reduce £45,000 later rather than 50,000? Could they keep a larger emergency cash reserve? And could they reduce spending temporarily after any poor investment years? Could they downsize in later life? Is this something that they want to do? Could they plan withdrawals more tax efficiently? Could they build in a reserve for care? And can they agree spending guardrails? For example, if the plan is ahead of target at age 67, they could continue spending. If it's behind target, they could reduce discretionary spending. This is how real retirement planning works, and it's really important to revisit this at least annually. It's not one calculation at age 60 that you blindly follow for the next 40 years. That would be like setting your sat-nav in Leeds, driving to Cornwall and ignoring every road closure and then blaming the car when you end up in a field. A retirement plan needs reviewing. There is also an emotional side to this as well. Many people are very good at saving, they're very good at building pensions, and they're very good at being sensible. But then retirement arrives and spending feels really uncomfortable. Every withdrawal feels like damage. Every market fall feels very personal. And even when the plan says they can afford to spend, they still feel a bit nervous. So they delay things, they avoid holidays, they do not help family where they potentially could, and they keep working longer than they need to. They wait for certainty, but retirement never offers perfect certainty. The aim is not to remove every possible risk. The aim is to understand the risks well enough to make confident decisions. Because being too aggressive can damage your future security, but being too cautious can damage your quality of life. And the danger is that you only realise that when the money's still there, but the opportunity is past. And this is our biggest challenge to help clients. We spend the majority of our time encouraging clients to spend and enjoy their money. And I did not think I would say that when I started as a financial advisor nearly 20 years ago. So, can you spend £80,000 a year from a £1 million retirement pot? If you mean £80,000 every year, increasing with inflation, regardless of what happens, then in this model, the answer is no. That runs into a shortfall at age 77. If you mean £40,000 a year, using the 4% rule, then yes, that looks extremely secure in this model. Possibly too secure, depending upon what actually want from retirement. But if you mean spending £80,000 a year during the early active years and then reducing spending later, the answer becomes much more interesting. That version reaches age 88 before the first shortfall appears. It's still not perfect, it's still not risk-free, and it still requires reviews, adjustments, and flexibility. Hopefully, through these different models, you can see how powerful it is to have control and help you make decisions using this type of software. It's still not perfect, it's still not risk-free, still requires regular reviews, adjustments and flexibility, but it's dramatically better than pretending £80,000 needs to continue forever. And that's the real lesson. £80,000 forever is probably too much. £40,000 forever may be too cautious, but flexible retirement spending may allow you to enjoy more of your money when it matters most. So now, I want to know, what would you do? If this was your £1 million retirement pot, would you play safe on £40,000 a year? Would you spend £80,000 and accept the risk? Or spend more in the early years and then reduce later? Please comment below. And if you want me to do a follow-up where I would add a market crash in the first few years of retirement, please comment on that. This video is for general information only. It is not personal financial advice. Your own retirement plan will depend on your income, pensions, tax position, investment risks, spending, health, family situation, and objectives. But hopefully it does show why retirement planning should not be reduced to 1%. The question is not simply how much can I withdraw? The better question is, how do I use my money to create the retirement I actually want without taking risks I can't afford? Thanks for watching.